Have you ever stared at the serene face of an ancient statue and felt a shiver run down your spine, a feeling that behind those stone eyes lies a secret so dark, so forbidden, it could shatter our entire understanding of history? What if I told you that the most sacred places of our ancestors, their magnificent temples, were not just houses of worship, but theaters of lust, power, and unimaginable secrets? For centuries, we've been taught a sanitized version of the past, a story of pious priests and devout followers. But the truth, etched in stone and whispered in forgotten texts, is far more shocking. A truth that powerful institutions have tried to bury for millennia. They don't want you to know what really happened behind those temple walls. They do want you to connect the dots between divine worship and the most primal of human desires. But tonight, we will pull back the veil. We will venture into the heart of the forbidden temples, where gods demanded more than just prayers, and where salvation was sought not through piety, but through pleasure. What you are about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about faith, power, and the dark, carnal soul of ancient civilizations. Step into the sprawling temple complexes of ancient India, like Khajuraho or Konark, and you are immediately confronted by a paradox that has baffled historians for centuries. The walls, meant to be sacred, are alive with a frenzy of writhing bodies. Stone figures are locked in every conceivable act of erotic embrace. Their faces a mixture of divine ecstasy and raw, carnal pleasure. Why would a place of worship be adorned with such explicit carvings? The conventional explanation is that these images represent the divine union of gods, a symbol of cosmic creation and spiritual bliss. But this is only a fraction of the story, the part they are comfortable telling. The deeper, more unsettling truth is that these carvings were not merely symbolic. They were a guide, a public advertisement for the practices that took place within the temple's inner sanctum. They served to blur the line between the sacred and the profane, suggesting that the path to spiritual enlightenment was not through ascetic denial, but through the full, uninhibited exploration of human desire. These sculptures normalized what modern society would deem taboo, embedding sensuality into the very fabric of worship. They were a constant, visible reminder that in this world, the gods did not just oversee the spirit, they reveled in the flesh. The carvings were a silent invitation, a promise of a connection to the divine that was intensely physical, visceral, and dangerously seductive. The connection between worship and human desire is one of antiquity's most profound and closely guarded secrets. In many ancient cultures, the creative life force, the energy of procreation, was seen as the most potent form of divine power on earth. Civilizations from Mesopotamia to Greece, from Egypt to India, believed that human sexuality was a mirror of cosmic creation. The act of love was not a sinful indulgence, but a sacred ritual, a way to participate in the eternal dance of the universe. Temple priests, the shrewd architects of social control, understood this primal connection. They knew that human desires for sex, love, and ecstasy were forces too powerful to suppress. So, instead of fighting them, they co-opted them. They wove these desires into the very fabric of religion, creating a system where spiritual devotion became inextricably linked with physical gratification. This was a masterstroke of psychological manipulation. By positioning the temple as the only place where one could legitimately explore these desires in a sacred context, they ensured a constant stream of devoted and often wealthy followers. The gods, they preached, were not distant, ethereal beings. They had appetites, passions, and desires, just like mortals. To please them, to win their favor, one had to honor these desires. Worship was no longer a passive act of prayer. It became an active, participatory experience that engaged the body as much as the soul. It was a transaction where carnal pleasure was exchanged for divine blessing, a spiritual economy built on the currency of lust. Inside the shadowy corridors of these temples, far from the public eye, rituals were performed that would make the modern world gasp. These were not simple prayers or offerings of incense. They were highly orchestrated ceremonies designed to channel raw sexual energy for spiritual and political gain. Imagine a secret chamber lit by flickering oil lamps, the air thick with the smell of exotic perfumes and intoxicating herbs. Here, select devotees, often from the highest echelons of society, would gather. Under the guidance of a high priest or priestess, they would engage in what is known as hieros, gamos, or sacred marriage. This was a ritualized sexual act, either with a temple priestess or among the devotees themselves, intended to reenact the divine union of gods and goddesses. It was believed that the potent energy released during this climax could ensure fertility for the land, victory in battle, or prosperity for the kingdom. These were not wild, uncontrolled orgies. They were precise, formulaic rites. Participants were often chosen based on astrological signs or bloodlines, and every movement, every word, was prescribed by ancient texts. In some tantric traditions in India, these secret circles, or chakras, would use wine, meat, and ritualized sex to transcend the physical world and achieve a state of non-dual consciousness. They believed that by embracing the forbidden, they could break the chains of ordinary reality and merge directly with the divine. These rituals were the temple's ultimate secret, a source of immense power and influence, reserved only for the initiated few who were deemed worthy or wealthy enough to partake. The kings and rulers of these ancient empires were not just pious patrons of religion. They were cunning political masterminds who understood the true power of the temples. They recognized that controlling the spiritual lives of their subjects was the key to controlling their worldly lives. By pouring immense wealth into the construction and maintenance of these grand temple complexes, they created visible symbols of their own power and piety, solidifying their divine right to rule. But their strategy went much deeper. By sanctioning and controlling the sacred rituals within, they effectively held a monopoly on salvation and divine favor. The temple became the center of the economy, owning vast tracts of land, employing thousands of people, and functioning as a bank, lending money and collecting taxes. The erotic carvings and the promise of sacred pleasure were part of this elaborate system of control. It kept the populace engaged, distracted, and dependent on the temple, and by extension, on the king. If a king wanted to ensure a good harvest, he wouldn't just consult his agronomists. He would sponsor a grand fertility ritual at the temple, a public spectacle that reinforced his role as the essential link between the people and the gods. Conversely, if a rival threatened his power, he could use the temple priests to declare them impious, cutting them off from the spiritual and social heart of the kingdom. The temple was the king's greatest weapon, an institution that controlled not just souls, but also wealth, land, and the very desires of the people. It was a system where lust was weaponized, and faith became the ultimate tool of statecraft. When historians and archaeologists began to systematically excavate these sites and decipher forgotten texts, they stumbled upon a truth that has been fiercely debated and often suppressed: the widespread existence of temple prostitution, or more accurately, the role of the sacred woman. These were not common sex workers. Known by various names, Devodaces in India, Kadishta in Mesopotamia, or Hitarai in Greece, these women were consecrated to the temple, often from a young age. They were highly educated, trained in music, dance, and sacred arts, and were considered the human vessels of the goddess. Their role was to bestow divine grace through sexual union with male worshippers. This was not seen as a sin, but as a holy act, a transfer of divine energy that could purify the man and bring him closer to the gods. The fees paid for their services were not for personal gain, but were considered offerings to the temple deity, contributing to the institution's immense wealth. Inscriptions found at a temple in Corinth, ancient Greece, suggest over 1,000 sacred courtesans served the goddess Aphrodite. Similarly, ancient Indian texts describe in detail the lives and duties of the devadas. However, as societies changed and new moralities, particularly those from Abrahamic religions, took hold, this practice came to be seen as depraved. The story was rewritten. These sacred women were rebranded as simple prostitutes, their spiritual role erased, their history sanitized to fit a new, more puritanical worldview. The discovery of their true function is a powerful reminder of how history is written by the victors, and how deeply our understanding of the past has been shaped by the moral judgments of later ages. The sacred woman, once a figure of honor and divine power, became a symbol of shame. Her story a casualty in the long war over who gets to define what is holy and what is profane. So, the next time you gaze upon the ruins of an ancient temple, look beyond the weathered stones and the official histories. Listen closer. You might hear the faint echoes of forbidden chants, the ghost of a sacred dance. You might sense the lingering energy of a world where desire was not a sin but a sacrament, and where power was forged in the crucible of lust and faith. The secrets of the forbidden temples are not just relics of a lost civilization. They are a mirror reflecting the hidden, primal truths about ourselves. They remind us that the line between the saint and the sinner, the sacred and the profane, has always been dangerously, intoxicatingly thin. And perhaps, just perhaps, the things we have been taught to fear are the very things that hold the key to understanding who we truly are. The truth has been hidden in plain sight, carved in stone for all to see, waiting for those brave enough to look.